This is basically what you're going to find on the platform. There's a bunch of features in here. The thing that people get most excited about right now is the ability for you to turn your crews into an API with no code in just a few minutes. And to get that, you just got to select your repository in here. So I'm going to select this crew plus test. And you can add your environment variables. And this will be, for example, your OpenAI token, or maybe another provider, or a Serper token if you're doing like Google searches or anything. And you can add them in here individually, or you can add them in bulk as well. And then you can click on deploy. CrewAI will automatically turn your crew into an API without you having to do anything about it. Before we get to see that though, let's build a crew real quick. The first thing that I would say is that you want to make sure that you're using a version that is above 3011. So that's the main criteria here. You got to be using that. And you got to be building your crews using our new crew create command. And the way that you can use it is by going in your terminal and typing CrewAI create in the name of your crew. This will basically create the initial folder structure for you with all the initial settings for your crew. So you don't have to worry about any of that. We can now go into that folder and open that up so that we can check some of the code. So the code should be pretty straightforward. If you have been using open source, you're going to be familiar with most of that. There's a few changes though. The main change that you're going to notice in here is that your agents and tasks are now YAML files. So in here, you can see this researcher agent, and in here, you can see this report analyst agent. The cool thing about being YAML files is that it's super easy for you to version, to comment on it, and even have non-technical people to update this themselves. So you don't have to rely solely on engineering to come with this up. And then the tasks are the same thing. You can see that the tests are now YAML files, and you have a research task here and a reporting task here. So the cool thing about this is that you can see some variables being interpolated. In this case, there is this topic variable that I'm interpolating here. When you turn your crew into an API, that variable will automatically become an attribute that you can send on your JSON request so that you can start this crew making sure that you pass in the topic. The class that all your configs come together is this crew.py file. This is where we load the agent and we load the tasks, and then we actually build the agents and the tasks. So in here, you can see that we already have a research and a reporter agent, and we already have a research and reporting task. So on the crew.py file, we basically create those two agents using that config and create those two tasks doing the same. So this file is pretty straightforward. Is where you bring your configs together, and where we can also set some stuff like tools. So we can say, for example, that our researcher agent will actually be able to search Google by using this Serper dev tool. And then let's say that we also want this agent to scrape websites. We also can import this scrape website too, and we can also add it in here. So now our researcher is able to search on Google and also scrape any websites that it finds. So you can see how this is straightforward, and this is pretty much what people are used to build with CrewAI, the open source. And custom tools are pretty straightforward as well. You basically give them a name, you give them a description, and then all your code lives inside this _run function. And you can put whatever you want in there. It can be an integration with an internal system, with an internal database, whatever is going to help you out to achieve your crew's goal. And in here, we're not going to use a custom tool just yet, but this crew should be good to go. You're going to notice that in your README file, there's going to be a few instructions in there on how you can install your dependencies and lock it to make sure that you don't forget to add your environment variables into this .env file, and how you can run this crew with this one single command. Well, let me go ahead and do that. All right, so I followed the README instructions and I locked and installed the dependencies, and I also added all my environment variables to the .env file. That means that now all I gotta do is run poetry run and the name of my crew, and we should start seeing logs for this crew executing in a second. And this crew will basically be the initial setup, but keep in mind that you can customize the agents and the tasks and the tools for whatever integration or automation you're trying to accomplish. So let's see those logs pop up. And there you have it. Here you can see our agents kick off and already using our SERP tool and searching the internet, getting results, scraping specific websites, and everything is working as intended. So let's check our code real quick before we turn this into an API. When we run this crew locally, this is the main file that kicks off, and this is where we pass the inputs. So if you look back on our agents and tasks, you remember that I mentioned that we have this topic being interpolated in here. In the main.py file is where we can see this topic being passed along for our crew. And this is basically intended for us to run this crews locally. Once that we turn this into an API, this main.py file doesn't really matter that much. This is just so that we can task things locally faster before we actually turn it into an API. So now that we know that these agents are running and we can see the report in here about the AI LLMs topic, we can basically turn this into an API. And this requires you to basically push this into a GitHub repository. So let me do that. All right, so as you can see in here, I just pushed it into GitHub. If we go into GitHub, we can see our README and all the information and how to run it and everything. So now, for us to turn this into an API, it's pretty straightforward. All we gotta do is come into CrewAI Plus. We'll find our repository. In this case, is the CrewAI Content Plus demo. So let's find that. And once that you select that, you can add your environment variables. So let me copy the ones that I have on the end file. And now I have just clicked on deploy, and you can see that this crew is starting to be deployed. So you can tag along through a progress bar in here, and you can see everything that is going on. Or you can also go inside this crew and see a lot of the logs. Let's check that out. All right, so if you click on the crew, you can see logs for the deployment, logs for the crew itself, and logs for the web once that's running and it's an API. In this case, that it's starting the deployment, and we can see some of the logs in here. The project was cloned, was configured, the environment variables are being created, it's building up the project setup, it's using the correct version of CrewAI. So it's gonna set everything up for us, and it should be available in a second. For the first deploy, it might take a while. So you can see that we started at 11:06 and it wrapped up at 11:12, so around 6 minutes. But for updates, it's usually way faster. Now, this is basically an API, and you get a URL and a bearer token, and you can call this API to do whatever you want. If you're curious about the endpoints that this API has, you can go into this Help Center article that gives you some insights into those, but I'm gonna show you in a second. All right, so let's try our API. I'm gonna copy the URL and the bearer token, and I'm gonna go into Postman to try this out real quick. So if you go into Postman, you can put your URL in here. The first endpoint that I'm gonna check out is the /inputs endpoint that tells me what I need to send to this crew for it to run. And I will pass the bearer token in here. And if I call this API, I get the topic back. That means that when I kick off this crew, I need to send a topic input in my JSON request. So let's do that. Let's make a post request now for the kickoff endpoint. And I want to make sure that I'm sending a body request that has basically an inputs key, and inside that, any inputs that I need to send. In my case, it's only a topic, and the topic is multimodal LLMs. So now I can make this API call, and I should get a task ID, as you can see in here. With this task ID, I can basically pull results back on how this crew is doing. But there's a lot more that I can do. I can also set up a lot of webhooks. So I can set a webhook for a task, I can set a webhook for every step, or I can set a webhook for the crew. And these are different granularity levels. So the step is the most granular. You're gonna get callbacks every time that the agents do anything. The task, it's less granular. So you're gonna get a request back every time a task is finishing. And the crew webhook is you get a request only when the whole crew finish executing. But you also get the status endpoint. So now let's check the status of the task. We can basically come in here and we can go into the status route, and we pass the task ID into that. And when we call that, we should get an update on how our crew is going so that it's running. We can see the last step and what was the action that was taken, and what was the result. And we can keep pulling this endpoint to get more up-to-date real-time updates. But I would advise you to use the webhooks because that will make your life easier. So you can do both ways. It's up to you. You're seeing like some features here on the left, and we're going to keep shipping super fast. Yeah, we'll let you know as new features drop. And I hope you have a blast with CrewAI. I'm super eager for any feedback. So if you have anything, please let me know either through support or directly reaching out to me over X or LinkedIn, up to you. I'm always eager to help out. All right, I catch you folks later, and I hope you have a great time with CrewAI Plus. Have a good one.